Welcome back to the Old Photo Vault channel. The Christmas She Stayed, Cedar Falls, Iowa, December 1958. The photograph shows Eleanor Hargreaves sitting on the carpet beside the Christmas tree, holding the dachshund the family called Penny. The room is tidy, almost careful, with wrapped gifts squared at the edges and tinsel hanging evenly, as if measured by hand. Eleanor had insisted the tree be real that year, though it shed needles faster than she liked. When the photo was developed, no one remarked on anything unusual. It was only later that her daughter noticed Eleanor's gaze was not toward the camera, but slightly past it, as if listening. Penny, usually restless, sits stiff in her arms. After Eleanor died the following spring, the family kept the photo on the mantle. Every December, they said the living room smelled faintly of pine, even before the tree was brought in. And sometimes, very late, the dog in the house would sit up and stare at the empty space beside it, waiting to be held. The second lamp, Prague, Czechoslovakia, autumn 1966. The photograph shows a young woman named Marta lying neatly across the hotel bed, her shoes set aside, her hair arranged as if she had taken care, even though no one was rushing her. The room looks ordinary. Heavy curtains, stiff pillows, two lamps meant to match. She said the mirror was included because the room felt smaller without it. When the film came back, her sister noticed a pale shape hovering beside the standing lamp, thin as breath on cold glass. Marta said it was only the curtain, the way fabric sometimes repeats itself. Yet the lamp beside the mirror was never turned on. And still the shade glows faintly in the image. Marta slept poorly in that room and asked to leave a day early. Years later, when the photo was found again, someone noticed the reflection's posture matched hers exactly, except it is facing the bed, waiting for her to lie down. The cabinet that learned her name, Salem, Massachusetts, October 1972. The photograph shows Judith Crowley leaning against her grandmother's cabinet, chin in her hand, the room crowded with lace, porcelain dolls, and small keepsakes no one remembered buying. It was an ordinary afternoon. Rain pressing lightly against the windows, the house smelling of dust and old perfume. Judith said she liked that corner because it felt watched over, not watched. When the photo was developed, her mother noticed a second figure in the cabinet glass, standing just behind Judith's shoulder, softer than a reflection, thinner than a shadow. Judith laughed it off, saying the cabinet had always been full of faces if you looked long enough. Years later, after Judith moved away, the cabinet was emptied and sold. The new owners said the room felt quieter, except at night, when the glass sometimes clouded on its own, and a faint outline appeared, leaning, waiting, as if expecting Judith to come back and finish posing. The fourth place at the rug, New Haven, Connecticut, February 1979. The photograph shows three friends on the living room rug after dinner, jackets tossed aside, wine warming in their hands. The night had gone pleasantly soft, the kind where no one remembers who suggested sitting on the floor. Daniel loosened his tie and laughed about nothing, while Claire leaned forward to set her glass down. Miriam turned toward the camera, half smiling, as if someone had just spoken her name. Later, when the picture was printed, Daniel noticed the space between them looked crowded, as though the pattern of the rug folded inward. A darker shape pressed there, knee-shaped, patient. They assumed it was a shadow, or the wine catching poorly. Years passed. Daniel moved away. Claire stopped visiting. Miriam kept the photo in a drawer. She said that sometimes, when she dreamed of that night, she could feel another warmth on the rug, breathing slowly, waiting for someone to notice it had been invited too. The wall that remembered them, North Yorkshire, England. Winter, 1904. The photograph shows an abandoned chapel with its pews still neatly aligned, each one draped in white cloth to keep the dust away. The coverings fall softly, shaped by time into the suggestion of bowed heads, as if a service had just ended. The wall behind them is cracked and peeling, patterned with old blue paint that no one bothered to repair. At first, the image feels peaceful, careful, even respectful. It was only after the photograph circulated that someone noticed the face emerging from the damaged plaster, halfway between two pews. It is faint, no more than a suggestion of eyes and a mouth, watching the rows below. Local records say the chapel closed suddenly after a sickness passed through the village, leaving few behind. The pews were covered and never uncovered again. Some say the face is only damp and shadow. Others say it appears clearer each year, as if still counting who never stood up to leave. The One Who Leaned In, Dayton, Ohio, summer 1989. The photograph shows Mark and Lila pressed together beside the car, laughing just before the shutter caught them mid-kiss. Someone had brought a cheap camera to the party, and the night felt warm and harmless, full of soda cans and music drifting from the house. Mark's arm circles Lila's shoulder in a way that looks practiced, comfortable. When the photo came back, they joked about how soft the edges looked, like the moment was already fading. It was Lila who noticed the face in the dark window behind them, pale and intent, watching the space between their mouths. Mark said it was glare, a reflection of balloons inside. But the face does not match either of them, and it is smiling too carefully. They broke up before autumn. Years later, Mark found the photo again and realized something he hadn't before. The face in the glass is leaning forward, lips parted, as if waiting for the kiss to finish so it could begin its own. The curtain that waited. Peoria, Illinois, spring 1962. The photograph shows Ruth Calder standing on a chair, polishing the kitchen light with a careful smile, her yellow apron tied neatly at the waist. It was taken on a quiet afternoon, just before company arrived. When the house smelled of soap and warm dust, Ruth liked things orderly. She liked knowing where everything belonged. The curtains behind her hang straight and clean, their folds even, almost formal. No one noticed anything unusual when the picture was first placed in an album. Years later, her sister paused over it and saw a face pressed softly into the fabric, pale and lengthened, as if the curtain had learned the shape of a woman watching. Ruth had once lived in the house alone after her husband died, speaking aloud while she cleaned so the rooms would not feel empty. She moved out the following year. The new owners replaced the curtains. Still, they said, on warm afternoons, the kitchen felt occupied, especially when the light was on and no one was standing beneath it. The gift that stayed behind. Altoona, Pennsylvania, December 1954. The photograph shows Helen Morris sitting stiffly on the sofa beside the Christmas tree, one hand resting on the small white dog she had owned since girlhood. The room is carefully prepared, tinsel draped evenly, presents stacked with their names facing out. Helen looks tired, but patient, as if waiting for someone to say the picture is finished. Nothing seemed wrong until the photo was examined years later after the house had been sold. Behind her, pressed into the patterned wallpaper, a child's face appears, too pale, too intent, its eyes turned toward the dog. Helen never had children, though neighbors said she often set an extra plate at Christmas. After she died, the dog refused to leave the sofa and slept there until it followed her a month later. The new owners kept the photograph in a drawer. They said that every December, one gift beneath the tree is warm to the touch, even before it is opened. The photograph that learned to shout. Rochester, New York, 1911. The photograph shows a woman leaning close to the camera, her hair falling forward, her mouth caught open as if mid-laugh or mid-breath. The room behind her is plain and domestic. A small table, a framed picture, nothing meant to last. The photographer wrote that the exposure was difficult, that she would not keep still. When the print was finished, The face seemed sharper than expected. The eyes too alert for a moment, meant to be playful. Over time, the paper yellowed and the edges cracked. But the expression only grew more urgent. Those who studied it said the mouth looked wider each year, the shadow inside it deeper, as though sound had been trapped there. The woman died young, of an illness that took her voice first. The photograph remained in a drawer. Long after, when it was taken out, people swore they could hear something faint, like a breath being drawn, still trying to finish what it began. The hands that reached first. Tallahassee, Florida, summer 1936. The photograph shows Maybelle Turner standing barefoot in the yard, overalls loose at the shoulders, a cigarette caught between her lips as she points playfully at the camera. The afternoon had been hot and lazy, the kind where nothing feels urgent and the ground still smells damp from morning rain. Behind her, the sheds sit quietly, their doors open just enough to breathe. When the picture was developed, Maybelle laughed at how faded it looked, as though she were already stepping out of it. Years later, someone noticed the shape behind her, longer than her shadow, rising where no person stood. It resembles a figure leaning forward, arms extended, hands almost touching hers. Maybelle died young, struck on that same patch of ground during a sudden storm. Locals say the yard never feels empty. If you stand there long enough, it seems something else reaches for you first. The Third Dancer, Mobile, Alabama, July 1974. The photograph shows Elaine and Ruth swaying in the living room, arms bent, hips loose, the record player just out of frame. It was an ordinary summer evening. Too hot to sit still, the air smelling faintly of furniture polish and sweat. They laughed when the picture was taken, already off the beat. Nothing seemed unusual until the film was developed. In the armchair behind them, a third figure appears, pale and unfinished, as if still deciding whether to join. The shape has Elaine's smile, but Ruth's posture, its feet barely touching the floor. They said it was double exposure, heat, cheap film. Years later, after Ruth died in a car accident, Elaine noticed something she hadn't before. The figure's hands are raised, waiting. Every time Elaine heard music alone, she felt it again. The sense that someone was keeping time beside her, careful not to step too hard, afraid of being seen. The one who learned the song, Eugene, Oregon, autumn 1971. The photograph shows Paul sitting on the floor with a borrowed guitar, smiling as if the chords were easy, while Karen leans into his back, her hands light on his shoulders. The room is cluttered with boxes and half-moved furniture, the kind of place meant to be temporary. Someone had asked for a song, and Paul had started one he only half knew. When the picture was developed, the warmth of it surprised them. The way Karen's face looked almost solemn, the way Paul's smile seemed held in place. It took years before anyone noticed the pale figure standing in the hallway behind them, thin and attentive, its head tilted as if listening closely. Paul died young, long before he finished writing anything worth keeping. Karen said that sometimes, late at night, she hears the guitar again, picking out the same unfinished tune, careful not to miss a note this time. The shape that borrowed her rest, Brighton, England. Late afternoon, 1987. The photograph shows Lydia lying across her bed, sorting through costume pieces she'd brought home from the theater, wigs tangled with scarves, shoes set neatly by habit. The room looks lived in and warm, light slipping in from the window and pooling around her shoulders. She said she liked afternoons best, when nothing was required of her yet. The picture feels casual, almost careless, until you notice the wall behind the bed. There, just above the pillow, a darker shape gathers, faint at first, like breath against paint. Lydia thought it was a trick of the radiator heat, the way shadows stretch when you stop watching them. But the shape has a head and shoulders and the posture of someone standing still so as not to wake another. Lydia moved out that winter. The next tenant said the room was difficult to sleep in. It always felt as though someone had risen first and was waiting quietly for the bed to be empty. The space between their hands. Moscow, Soviet Union, early 1960s. The photograph shows Masha and Dasha Krivoshlyampova lying on the wooden floor, laughing as their little brother Yuri toddles toward them, his hands reaching, unsure where to land. The room is plain, warmed only by movement and breath. They share the same body, the same pulse. Yet each face turns toward Yuri in a slightly different way, as if noticing different futures. It was said they learned early how to take turns being brave. Taken from their mother, moved from place to place, they grew up among white walls that listened too closely. In this picture, though, they look briefly unobserved, ordinary. Years later, after their hearts finally stopped together, Yuri said he kept the photo because something in it never settled. When he looks long enough, he feels a third presence there. Not behind them, but between them, quietly holding what neither sister was ever allowed to keep alone. The one who waited by the stove. Uppsala, Sweden, autumn 1976. The photograph shows Anna at the stove, focused on the food, her shoulders slightly hunched as if listening for something to boil over. Behind her, Lena pauses mid-step, spatula in hand, wearing the floppy hat she insisted was practical indoors. It was an ordinary evening, the kitchen warm with oil and bread, towels drying where they always did. The picture feels careless, taken too soon. Only later did anyone notice the figure in the doorway, pale, narrow, and standing very straight, as though taught not to be in the way. Anna said it was steam or the camera aging badly. But the figure's eyes seemed fixed on the stove, patient and exact. Years later, after Lena moved away, Anna said cooking alone became difficult. She would turn, certain someone was waiting behind her, ready to take the pan, just as soon as she stepped aside. The one who arrived first. Pine Hollow, Tennessee, summer 1973. The photograph shows Carol and Denise beside the red car, smiling easily, the trunk open with boxes half packed for the drive home. The afternoon was bright and unremarkable. Cicadas loud enough to fill the spaces between their laughter. Denise points toward the camera, joking about being late, while Carol steadies a box against her hip. Nothing seems staged. Only later does the left side of the image begin to feel crowded. Between the trees, a tall, pale shape stretches upward, longer than any shadow should be, its outline thinned by light and distance. It stands apart, already waiting. Carol said it must have been glare or a smear on the lens. But Denise never liked stopping there again. Years later, after Carol died suddenly on a rural road, Denise noticed something she hadn't before. The figure is angled toward the car, as if it reached the clearing ahead of them long before they did, patient enough to let them smile first. The shadow that sat first. Madison, Wisconsin. Late evening, 1978. The photograph shows Evelyn seated sideways at her desk, one foot resting on the tabletop, papers pushed back to make room. The apartment is quiet, ordinary, curtains drawn, drawers closed, a candle left unlit beside a small radio. She said she worked better at night, when the room felt settled. At first, the picture seems unremarkable, even playful. Then the shadow appears. It gathers beneath the desk and climbs the cabinet behind her, thicker than her body allows, shaped like someone seated more carefully than she is. Evelyn laughed when it was pointed out, saying the lamp was old and the wiring unreliable. But the shadow does not follow the angle of the light, and its knees are bent before hers are. Years later, after Evelyn moved away, the next tenant complained that the chair was always warm, as if someone had been sitting there already. waiting for her to return and finish what she started. The One Who Watched the Screen. Go Dark, Bremen, West Germany. Winter 1982. The photograph shows Ingrid sitting cross-legged on the floor, holding a record sleeve she pretends not to care about. Her expression is half defiant, half amused. The look of someone aware they are being watched, but unwilling to give in to it. The room is small and familiar. A low cabinet, scattered magazines. The television balanced carefully on its shelf. Everything feels settled, paused. It is only later that the shelf begins to feel crowded. Beneath the television, a pale shape gathers, rounded and smooth, like a head, rising just enough to see. It does not belong to any reflection in the glass, and it looks forward, not at Ingrid, but at the dark screen itself. Ingrid said the TV often turned off by itself that winter. Years later, when the set was thrown away, the shelf still felt wrong, as if something had learned where to sit and was waiting for the picture to start again. The One Who Knelt Before Dinner. Aarhus, Denmark. Winter 1994. The photograph shows Sophie and Anna sitting on the bedroom floor, bowls balanced in their hands, a single candle burning between them because the overhead light felt too harsh. They had moved the bed earlier that day and never put it back properly, leaving the room unsettled in small ways. Sophie looks toward the camera, mid-sentence, while Anna touches her lip, thinking about something she hasn't said yet. Nothing about the evening was meant to be serious. Only later does the right side of the image begin to trouble people. Near the small table, behind Anna's shoulder, a thin figure seems to stand where there is no space. Pale and intent, its posture careful, almost polite. They said it was reflection or smoke from the candle. Years later, Sophie admitted she still remembers that night clearly. Not for what they ate, but for the feeling that someone else was waiting quietly for them to finish. As if dinner was never meant for just two. The Graves That Learned to Breathe. Charleston, South Carolina. After the storm, 1921. The photograph shows the old churchyard filled with water, headstones standing like shoulders in a crowded room. Palmettos lean inward, their fronds dripping steadily, and the iron fence disappears where the ground gives way. It had rained for days, enough that the river forgot its edge. People came afterward to count the damage, to read what names they still could. In the picture, the water lies smooth, almost careful, reflecting stone and sky without complaint. Only when you look longer does it seem unsettled. Between the markers, faint ripples gather where nothing moves, as if something beneath the surface has shifted its weight. Old records say the cemetery was built low because the land was cheaper there. During floods, locals claimed the ground never truly emptied again. Even when the water receded, the soil stayed soft. Some said it was because the graves had learned the feel of breath and were reluctant to let it go. If these images unsettled you, pause the video and look again. Sometimes the photograph notices you back. Tell us in the comments what you saw and when you first noticed it. Was it a shadow, a face, or something that didn't belong there at all? If you have a vintage photo with a story you can't explain, share it with us. And if you want to keep exploring the quiet places where memories linger, don't forget to like, subscribe, and return for the next image that refuses to stay still.